So hello and welcome to the video. I recently spent 9 days on the Norwegian Gem bobbing around the Mediterranean with my mum, and I had a great time. It was my first cruise with Norwegian Cruise Lines, and I have to say that my history with them hadn't been great. I'll talk about that history in a little more detail as part of point 6 in this video. But as the on-board experience is very well regarded, we decided to give them a go. And the on-board experience was very good, but more importantly, for the purposes of making a video such as this, some aspects of the Norwegian cruising experience were really quite different from what I'd experienced on other cruise lines. So in this video I'll talk about the 6 ways that Norwegian cruises is different. My goal is to give you an insight in Norwegian. If you've never cruised with anyone before, might Norwegian be the place to start? If you've only ever cruised with Norwegian, this might give you an idea how some other cruise lines might be different. And if you've cruised extensively with others but never with Norwegian, this might help you understand whether Norwegian is actually a good option for you. So if that sounds good, stick around! Hi, I'm Matt and I love cruising. I love the ships, the places you visit, the entertainment, and every now and again I'll also enjoy a drink. So subscribe to see where I go next and perhaps get some inspiration for your next cruise. The most obvious differentiator may well be a slogan you're already familiar with even if you've never cruised with Norwegian, and that's freestyle cruising. In Norwegian's own words, imagine cruising just the way you want it. It sounds great, doesn't it? So let's look at it in a little more detail. And as it's such a big deal on Norwegian, I'm going to split this point into 2. The drawbacks of freestyle cruising, because there are some, but let's start with the benefits. Norwegian does a few things under the freestyle banner that really does support the customer experience, even if it actually makes Norwegian's job harder. I talked about 2 of them in my review of that cruise, which you can find here. But as a recap, the first is that you don't have to commit to an early or late sitting in the main dining room. Indeed, you don't need to make a single restaurant reservation for the duration of your cruise. Instead, you just turn up where you like, when you like. When other cruise lines force people into sittings, they do so mainly for the cruise line's benefit, as it greatly streamlines their workflows. That should echo back onto the guest experience, as a streamlined kitchen workflow should produce a better customer experience. On Norwegian, they accept the disruption to their workflows that arise from not knowing specifically when their customers are going to go and dine, which as a guest feels pretty good. Getting a seat can still require some planning from the guest. You should still make a reservation if you have an eye on a particular venue at a specific time. Norwegian does though offer displays which show seat availability. I very much enjoyed not being forced to eat at a certain time and having great flexibility over when and where I did eat. The second inconvenience for Norwegian that actually benefits the guests is tendering, which on my recent cruise was a positive joy. Normally it's a right pain, but on Norwegian they took significant steps to make the experience as smooth for their guests as possible. Plenty of tender vessels were available, made up both from the ship's lifeboats and from local vessels, so we never waited more than a few minutes for a tender. Another enhanced process we noticed, compared to other lines at least, was disembarkation. The process was essentially the same. There were still luggage tags and the guests were asked to leave the ship based on the tag that they'd applied to their luggage. But instead of having 50-odd tag numbers, as had been the case on our recent celebrity cruise, Norwegian had perhaps half a dozen coloured tags, and instead of having the tag number allocated to you based on some opaque algorithm which effectively randomised the time that you were allowed to leave the ship, Norwegian invited you to pick your own tag and choose the time that you wanted to leave. It was extremely stress-free. We had a plane to catch, so had decided to carry our own bags off, which we thought would de-risk the whole tag process. But we needn't have worried, as disembarking would have been just as rapid and stress-free had we used Norwegian's tags. The only real problem we experienced was the weather, which was absolutely awful. So freestyle cruising is a major differentiator, and I really liked it. There were, though, some consequences of freestyle cruising that weren't quite so positive, so let's address those as point 2. Having set dining sittings allows the cruise line to take advantage of having a lot of their guests in one place at one time. Not so much since the restart, but cruise lines did take this opportunity to have the captain turn up in the dining room perhaps and make a speech. Or the kitchen staff would be introduced and might have a bit of a dance, or the waiters might even sing a song. With less structure to the dining, this opportunity for value-added interaction is much harder to engineer. So it didn't happen at all, on our cruise at least. Similarly, Norwegian's freestyle cruising doesn't include formal nights. These are opportunities for people to dress up, secure in the knowledge that most other people will too. Plus, they were opportunities for elevated menus to be offered, lobsters, beef Wellingtons, that sort of thing. I do like them, and I did miss them, and I did also miss having those elevated dishes that I usually quite look forward to enjoying. But I know a lot of cruise enthusiasts don't really care about the formal nights, so perhaps that pivots this point onto the other side of the ledger and makes it a positive. Norwegian does encourage you to visit any restaurant you want, and a pillar of their freestyle strategy is to offer choice, so there can be over 20 restaurants on their larger ships, and even our smaller ship had 11. But remember that many of them are speciality restaurants which do incur a fee. So your ability to freestyle around the ship is somewhat dependent on your willingness to pay for the privilege. And finally, Norwegian's app that you get to use aboard the ship was really poor, certainly compared to their competitors. Basic features like menus weren't available, and some of the value-added stuff that you see on other cruise lines just wasn't there. The third point of difference is the ship's design. A ship is a ship at the end of the day, so your degrees of freedom in design are not infinite, but Norwegian does try to be different in how their ships look and feel. I travelled on one of their older ships, the Gem, which was launched 15 years ago, but even back then you could see that they were trying to optimise the space available. As I've said, choice is a key plank of their freestyle strategy, and the Gem has 13 bars and 11 restaurants aboard, which is a count that is higher than many larger ships I've been on. Some of those bars are really quite small, but they are all themed to some degree and can be distinguished when you're in them. Indeed, some of the bars are quite distinctively themed. That's not always the case on cruise ships. I'm thinking specifically of Princess cruises here, where many of their bars feel very, very similar. I'd read that this compartmentalisation of space created a sense of claustrophobia, and that some of the deck plans were quite unintuitive. Having now travelled with Norwegian, I can understand both of those comments, but it didn't really bother me, and you very quickly get the hang of the layout. And it was great fun to have so many varied spaces to choose from. Norwegian aims to be a family brand, so there is significant space allocated to kids clubs and other family activities. On their more modern ships, there are some quite significant features that are more akin to what you might find in a shore resort rather than on a ship. Things like go-kart arenas, laser tags and water parks. In that regard, Norwegian is in competition with Royal Caribbean for offering the most substantial facilities at sea. Point 4 is how Norwegian sells its cruises. You perhaps won't feel like you're having a freestyle cruising experience if you have to put your hand in your pocket every time you want to consume something. So Norwegian offers a kind of all-inclusive option as part of their booking process. Indeed, as Norwegian seems to be ramping up its bookings more slowly than some of its competitors, that kind of all-inclusive option is virtually a permanent offering. If you look at a Norwegian fare and they're not currently offering that all-inclusive option, wait 10 minutes, and they probably will. This all-inclusive package adds drinks, some Wi-Fi, a couple of nights of speciality dining, extra passengers in the cabin, and money towards excursions. All of which is great, but I said kind of all-inclusive a couple of times, as there's still more that you'll pay. The drinks package covered drinks up to $15 on my recent cruise, but there were still a number of premium offerings above that price that you'd have to buy up to if you wanted them. And the drinks package does not include bottled water, which I think is a real shortcoming and is a misjudgment from Norwegian. The package includes $50 towards an excursion in every port, but most excursions cost more than that, and indeed some cost a lot more. So you probably will still have to pay to get the excursions you want. And the included Wi-Fi includes 150 minutes of connectivity, so you have to keep a close eye on how you actually use that time. It's a great package, and it really is good value, particularly at the moment, but it is some way short to being a genuine all-inclusive offering. Point 5 concerns Norwegian's ownership, which is American. And my cruise was a very American experience. Other cruise lines are based in America, but they seem to make more of an effort to localise the experience when they are cruising through ports outside of North America. So what do I mean? Well, the vast majority of the ship's entertainers were American, and the production shows had a strong American theme. One focused on country music, which is not widely appreciated in Europe, and another focused on US sitcoms of the 70s and 80s, almost all of which were never broadcast in Europe. And the portions were huge, which is in no way, shape or form a criticism. Around half the passengers were from the US, but around half of them weren't. And I think in a lot of cases the entertainment sort of missed the pulse of the customer base. And point 6 concerns Norwegian cruises away from the ship. And my experience, and the experience of many other people I've spoken to, is that they are terrible. I had a cruise cancelled as part of the you-know-what, and Norwegian promptly refunded me, which was fine. I also offered a rebooking incentive that was very, very generous. It was written in English, which is a language with which I have some proficiency, but when we called to make a booking to take advantage of this generosity, they refused to honour it. I made a couple of videos about the saga which I'll link to up here, but what really annoyed me was that Norwegian refused to actually speak to me about it. I wanted to discuss it with them, but they just repeatedly refused to engage. On our recent cruise, we had an issue in that some of the bars were required to close when we were in some of the Greek ports. I talked about that in my review of the cruise. I complained on board the ship, and I have written to Norwegian since we returned, but at the time of recording, I've not heard back from them. So like many travel providers at the moment, the on-board service with Norwegian is pretty much back to normal, even if their shore-based support staff really haven't got their game together yet. So that's 6 ways in which Norwegian differentiates themselves from their competition. I enjoyed my time with them, I enjoyed it greatly, and I am looking forward to finding an opportunity to travel again with them, perhaps on one of their bigger, more modern ships, where they are better able to fully express this freestyle cruising concept. Even if I'm dreading any interaction I'm going to have with them off the ship. So thanks for watching. Please give this video a like if you got something from it. Please leave me a comment too. Have you sailed Norwegian? Would you consider them after watching this? Please subscribe if you're new, and if you'd like to support what I'm doing more directly, I do have a Patreon account, the link to which is in the description below. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.